Good morning, students. Welcome back to our lecture series on international economics. In today's lecture, we begin our formal analysis of classical trade theory by studying the Ricardian model of trade. This model provides the first systematic explanation of comparative advantage based on differences in labor productivity and technology. Let us begin. To understand why this model is important, let us connect it with what we studied. In the previous lecture, we discussed the principle of comparative advantage and how gains from trade arise. We saw that opportunity cost determines the pattern of specialization and trade allows consumption beyond the production possibility frontier. Today, we formalize these ideas mathematically using the Ricardian framework. This will move us from intuition to structured economic analysis. So, what exactly is the Ricardian model? The Ricardian model was developed by David Ricardo in 1817. It is essential and central focus on classical trade theory. Its central idea is simple but powerful. International trade arises because countries differ in technology. These technological differences lead to differences in labor productivity, and differences in labor productivity creates differences in opportunity cost. The model shows that even if one country is absolutely more productive in all goods, trade can still be beneficial. To simplify analysis, the model makes several assumptions. The Ricardian model is based on several simplifying assumptions. There are two countries and two goods. Labor is perfectly mobile with each country, but cannot move internationally. Production exhibit constant return to scale. There are no transportation cost and no trade barriers. These assumptions allow us to focus purely on a role of technology. Now, let us understand what we mean by a one-factor economy. In this model, labor is the only input in one-factor economy. We define unit labor requirements. Suppose ALX represents the number of labor hours needed to produce 1 unit of X. Similarly, ALY is the unit labor requirement for good Y. If ALX is low, labor productivity in X is high. Actually, ALX and ALY are the unit labor requirement for good X and good Y respectively. This productivity and unit labor requirements are inversely related. Using this, we can now derive the production possibility frontier. Production possibility frontier. Suppose total labor available in the country is L. If all labor is devoted to produce X, maximum X equal to L divided by ALX. If all labor is devoted to producing Y, then maximum Y equal to L divided by ALY. Since labor must be allocated between X and Y, we write the full employment condition as ALX times X plus ALY times Y equals to labor L. This is the full employment condition. Let us now examine the slope of PPF. The slope of the PPF, production possibility frontier, is equal to minus ALX divided by ALY. This slope measures how many units of Y must be sacrificed to produce one more unit of X. That is exactly the opportunity cost of X. Therefore, in the Ricardian model, opportunity cost equals the ratio of unit labor requirement. This is the key determinant of comparative advantage. But how does this differ from absolute advantage? Let us see. Absolute versus comparative advantage. A country has absolute advantage if it has lower unit labor requirement in producing a good. However, comparative advantage depends on the relative ratio of labor requirement. Even if one country has lower ALX and lower ALY, it may not have comparative advantage in both goods. Comparative advantage depends on which good has relatively lower opportunity cost. Let us now move to the concept of relative supply. Relative supply. Relative supply is defined as the ratio of X to Y produced in the economy. Under autarky, production depends on domestic relative prices. If the relative price of X exceeds the opportunity cost, and the country will specialize in X. If it is lower, that is, price of X is lower than the opportunity cost, then it will specialize in Y. Because specialization is complete under constant opportunity cost. The relative supply curve become step shift. To determine equilibrium price, we also need relative demand. In the next slide. Now, let us discuss the relative demand. The relative demand depends on consumer preferences. As the relative price of X rises, consumer substitutes away from X. Thus, the relative demand for X falls as its price rises. This gives us a downward sloping relative demand curve. Now, equilibrium in the world market occurs when relative supply equals relative demand. This brings us to the determination of terms of trade. The international relative price is determined at the intersection of world relative supply and relative demand. This price must lie between the two countries' opportunity cost. If it lies outside that range, one country would not specialize. Thus, the terms of trade emerge from global market interaction. Once trade begins, what happens to production? Because opportunity cost is constant, countries fully specialized. Each country produces only the good in which it has comparative advantage. This increases total world output. Complete specialization is a distinctive features of the Ricardian model. Let us now examine gains from trade. Gains from trade. Gains from trade rise because specialization increases efficiency. Each country trade at a price better than its domestic opportunity cost. As a result, both countries can consume more than under autarky. Graphically, consumption lies beyond the domestic production possibility frontier. To understand this clearly, we often use numerical example. Suppose country A has ALX equal to 2 and ALY, that is input requirement for producing good Y, equal to 4. Country B has ALX, that is input requirement for producing good X, equal to 6 and ALY equal to 3. We first calculate opportunity cost. Then identify comparative advantage. Then determine specialization pattern. We will solve this step by step in the next lecture. Let us now summarize the main insights for the present lecture. The Ricardian model shows that technology differences create trade. Comparative advantage depends on opportunity cost. Complete specialization may occur. International price is determined by relative supply and relative demand. Both countries gain. However, like all models, it has some limitations. The limitations of Ricardian model. The Ricardian model assumes only one factor, that is labor. It ignores income distribution effects. It assumes constant opportunity cost. It ignores transport cost and trade policy. For more realistic explanation, we need the hexagonal model. Let us in the next lecture we will solve numerical examples in detail. We will calculate opportunity cost, determine specialization, and find the range of mutual beneficial terms of trade. Please revise unit labor requirement and opportunity cost carefully. These concepts are central to classical trade theory. Let us conclude. But before concluding today's lecture, let us test our understanding with a model questions answer. Consider this question. Explain how the Ricardian model shows that comparative advantage depends on opportunity cost rather than absolute advantage. To answer this, we begin with the basic structure of the Ricardian model. The model assumes that labor is the only factor of production and production is determined by unit labor requirements. Absolute advantage means a country requires fewer labor hours to produce a good. However, comparative advantage depends on opportunity cost, which is measured by the ratio of unit labor requirements. A country has comparative advantage in the good for which this ratio is lower. Even if a country has lower labor requirement in both goods, it will specialize only in the good with relatively lower opportunity cost. Therefore, the Ricardian model clearly demonstrates that trade is driven by opportunity cost differences, not by absolute productivity, differences in absolute productivity. Let us now consider a slightly more analytical question. This question asks, using the Ricardian model, explain how terms of trade are determined and why they must lie between opportunity costs. In the Ricardian framework, opportunity cost determine autarky price in each country. When trade opens, countries specialize based on comparative advantage. The international price or terms of trade is determined by the interaction of relative supply and relative demand in the world market. For trade to occur and benefit both countries, the international price must lie between the two countries' opportunity cost. If the price is below the lower opportunity cost, one country will not specialize. On the other hand, if it is above the higher opportunity cost, the other country will not specialize. Therefore, only prices within the range ensure specialization and mutual gain. This explains why terms of trade must lie between opportunity costs. These model questions summarize the most important analytical insights from the Ricardian model. Please practice writing structure answers like this in examinations. Best wishes. Thank you for your attention. Please revise the concepts carefully before the next lecture.